Welcome everyone to the Yale Alumni Nonprofit Alliance webinar on philanthropy and fundraising in the COVID era, sponsored by the YANA Colorado chapter. My name is Rachel Littman. I'm the executive director of YANA. Thank you for joining us today. This program, like all of our webinar programs, will be recorded and distributed through email links to everyone who registered, and then we will clean it up and we have it up on our YouTube channel. And depending on how the audio goes, we usually can strip these out, and so you'll have a number of different ways to follow up or refer back through a podcast on Buzzsprout. So please check this out later. Tell your friends about YANA. Please check out our website, yana.community. Without further ado, I'd like to hand this over to Michael Mazer, one of our co-chairs of YANA Colorado. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Rachel. First, we appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon. I'm Michael Mazer, and along with Rachel Tibbetts, we co-chair the Colorado chapter of YANA. I'd like to encourage any YANA Colorado members to reach out to Rachel or me with any suggestions for future webinars. Our panelists today work for a diverse group of organizations, and we're confident you'll enjoy and learn something from this webinar. Rachel will have emails of participants in the chat section. Feel free to contact them afterwards with any questions. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Patty Breech. Patty is part of YANA Colorado and graduated from Yale in 2006. She lives in Boulder and is the founder and CEO of the Purpose Collective, which is a consulting firm that helps purpose-driven organizations with their digital marketing. So Patty, please take it from here.
Thank you so much. It's really good to be here, and I am really excited to introduce these panelists. We have a great lineup for you guys today. I just want to echo, we really hope that all of you get a lot out of this session. We're here to help give you some actionable tips for your own organizations, so please definitely let us know what questions we can answer for you in the chat section. We want to make sure this is as useful for you as possible. So thank you so much to our 4 panelists for joining us. We have 2 from the nonprofit sector and 2 from the funding sector. So I'll start with the 2 nonprofit executives. We have Lauren Arnold. She's the CEO of the Adoption Exchange, soon to be Raise the Future, which believes that every young person deserves to go through life knowing that they have a caring adult by their side. Their work introduces youth in foster care to adults they can rely on and supports those connections so they last for a lifetime. We also have Vicki Nichols Goldstein here. She is the founder and executive director of the Inland Ocean Coalition, an organization that inspires and empowers inland citizens to have a voice in ocean protection. And then on the funding side of things, we have Benilda Benny Samuels. She's the Vice President of Programs for the Rose Community Foundation, where she's responsible for granting approximately $10 million annually to create a more inclusive, engaged, and equitable Greater Denver area. We also have Tony Lewis. He's the CEO of the Donnell-Kay Foundation, an organization that invests $1 million annually in forward-thinking education programs across the state with the most potential to change the experience of learning for kids. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk to all 4 of you. And I think I will start off with a question for the nonprofit side of the panel. So Lauren, can you tell us a bit more about how your organization recently diversified your fundraising streams? I understand you used to have more of an event-centric fundraising model that you moved away from?
Yeah, absolutely. Over the years, so I've been with the organization just about 7 years, and early on when I first joined, we were almost 100% dependent upon events, which from my perspective had a couple problems with it. One of our events, just as Vicki was telling me earlier, or somebody, was between sort of that Thanksgiving and year end type of thing, and here in Colorado, to me, that's a big risk as far as weather. If people don't show up, there's snowstorm, people don't show up. But more importantly, it was really a low ROI strategy. And when I say it means it costs a lot of time and effort to raise money through events, and you don't have a long-term connection with those donors. So we made a very strategic shift to try and move away from this 100% reliance on events. That doesn't mean they've gone away entirely, though in some ways I might love that they would, but they won't. I don't think they ever will. But really shifted to now they're only about a third of our fundraising. And so we did that both by taking away some events as well as really shifting our strategy in fundraising to much more of a donor engagement strategy, a major donor strategy, and really focusing on connections with our donors so that we could rely on them for the long term. And so we've done that over a couple of years. It wasn't a 1 year, we'll pull the plug in and put it into place.
That's great. And so when you did that shift, did you need to, go out and find hire a new team with a new skill set for that?
We definitely started with a leader who understood how to do that, who had a vision for what we could do and how we could do it. Then she really brought along her team into that model. And to be perfectly frank, some really got into it and understood it. And then others were like, this isn't quite what I wanted to do. And so there's been some transition in the team over time. But for the most part, it really started with getting the right leader who was really invested in a sales process and a relationship building process.
That's wonderful. And so in addition to getting the right leader, do you have any other resources or advice to help organizations?
Yeah, there's a Colorado-based organization, consultants that actually do trainings across the country. And they're really wonderful at helping people recognize that a lot of development is sales and it's a sales process. And I know we don't like to talk about that, but it's how do you use mission and the drive, but use some of the quality benchmarks around sales about your pipeline and how you're focusing on your great ones. And they're called For Impact. And so they do some boot camps around the country, relatively low cost, and they do lots of things. So I love them. And then I think there are some consultants out there who really understand how to think about this idea of prospect, et cetera. And I'd be happy to give people those names afterwards, or if they reach out to me. There's a couple that are really good at that we've utilized over that period.
Wonderful, thank you. And Vicki, a question for you. So I understand that you recently added some more donors to your monthly giving program. Where did you find those donors?
So we had a very interesting situation. So we're all about protecting oceans and waterways and reducing plastic. And the idea is that you don't have to see the ocean to protect it. But we have been very active in the Front Range we have 16 chapters and we have 3 in Colorado. So we've been very active. And then when COVID hit, we had to rethink everything because we had numerous events and creek cleanups, and I could go on and on. So we decided, instead of doing our volunteer training in person, that we would take our volunteer training online. So we now have a virtual Inland Ocean Ambassador program. And we started thinking, do we charge to be a volunteer, or do we create this sense of community and set up a monthly donor giving program and define it so when they come in to volunteer, they're coming into a bigger family framework. So we started that this year, and it was very successful. So we have 25 new monthly recurring donors, and we'll be launching another training coming up in a couple of weeks. And so that recruitment is going very well. And that's been really exciting for us because people are donating, but they're also volunteering and they're also participating in these virtual experiences. So it really does create a real sense of family.
That's great. So your volunteers have proved to be excellent donors. That's wonderful. I'd love to just ask one more question about, you mentioned you took your volunteer training program online. Was that a difficult transition? What was that process like for you guys?
Well, we really just had to reevaluate what would work in person and what wouldn't. But it was advantageous for us because we wanted to strengthen our chapters with additional leadership, but we also wanted to create new chapters. So we had to go through it, and instead of going to our local community to get speakers, we work very closely with the scientists at UCAR and with CU and DU. We were able to really reach out across the US and internationally to bring in really top-notch speakers. So it actually was beneficial. And it took us out of our comfort zone of events in the Boulder, Denver area into a much broader range of volunteers and donors. And it also has allowed us to increase our diversity, because Boulder is, Boulder. And so reaching out of that zone has really helped in diversity, inclusion, and then just more engagement across the board.
Wonderful. And just wondering, did you receive any pushback from the volunteers in training when you asked them to become a part of your monthly giving program?
No, because we tried to define it so it was very inclusive. We did have a few donors who, after the training and after their volunteer opportunities, reduced their price, but mostly everybody's just been sticking with it and getting all the information and participating in the variety of other enrichments that we have in other webinar opportunities. We have blue drinks now virtually, so I don't know if we'll get back to that another time, but that's a place where people bring their cocktails and learn about oceans and get involved.
It looks like we have one question from the chat. Just wondering about over what time period did that change happen where your volunteer training went virtual?
It went quick. So I think we had the lockdown started at around mid-March, and we launched our training, gosh, I'm looking at my calendar, I think 3 months later. So we had the concept, the ideas, and we just had to revamp it and put it into fast gear. So we were able to do it very quickly because, like I said, we had the content, we had the ideas. We just had to figure out the mechanisms and get the recruitment going.
Wonderful, thanks, Vicki. Benny, I'd like to turn the conversation over to the funder side for a moment. I'm really interested to hear what kinds of programs are you seeking to fund right now, and have your funding priorities changed much in the last few months?
Yes, thank you. Things have changed a great deal in the last few months. And so Rose Community Foundation had launched a strategic plan in January of this year, where they were announcing a change in their priorities. They had historically been in specific funding areas like education and aging and health and early childhood. And in a change of leadership, a new strategic plan and vision was devised. And in January, they launched a new strategic plan, which calls for the foundation to focus on equity, inclusion, and creating a more engaged Denver metro area. And so that in and of itself has created a great deal of change within the foundation. And that was what the foundation was preparing to build and to work on before COVID hit. And when COVID hit, the board of directors made a decision that all funding throughout the 2020 year would go to respond, mitigate, or serve as recovery for things related to COVID. We continue to be true to our strategic plan in that every grant that we are putting out is viewed and looked at from an equity lens, right? Who is being most affected by COVID, and where is COVID exacerbating inequities that we can support sort of, not restoring that, or at least alleviating that. And so a great deal of change. So what we were planning to do in January is not exactly what we're doing right now. Still doing it very much with an equity lens, but very much focused on COVID and on racial justice.
Wonderful. And so for organizations that are addressing COVID and addressing racial justice, so ones that I might call like sort of the first responder organizations, do you have any advice for them if they're seeking funding from a foundation like yours?
Yeah, I think in in applications to be as specific as possible, even if what you're requesting is general operating dollars, just to be as specific as possible in terms of what the organization is hoping to accomplish. We've, of course, also, as many foundations have done, we've relaxed all sorts of reporting and, and even the application process has really become a lot more easy to respond to, which is probably something that should have been happening before. And we've been sort of forced to be in this place, which is not a bad thing. But just to be fairly specific about what you're hoping to accomplish, even if you're asking for general operating dollars. And, I'll say this, we because I think that for fundraisers, this tends to be a question sometimes, right? If the application says you have 5,000 words, you don't have to use the 5,000 words, right? just put it out there. What do you want to do, and how, and to what end? Boom, and that's enough for us at this point.
Wonderful. And we've got a question coming in. So when your funding priority changed, did you notify the people that you've been funding? Did you notify people who are receiving funds that our priority is shifting now?
Well, the foundation had actually, because there was a new strategic plan, the foundation had actually stopped doing any new granting until we had been completed with our strategic plan work. But there were still organizations that we had been working with for years, right? So those organizations, each and every one of them knew a year in advance that the strategy was going to change, and they also receive a transition grant to sort of make sure that they were ramping down. And of course, some of them are still very much able to apply now. But so that's what we did. Those who we were working with received notice a year in advance, and there was a transition grant that went to them.
Wonderful. And one last question on this topic for you. What about organizations whose work is not as closely related to COVID or racial justice? Do you have any advice for them? Like, do you think they should be trying to shift their focus to be more about those areas?
I do not think that they should try to shift their focus. But I have had feedback conversations with many organizations who've come through our application process who did not receive COVID grants, who would say to me, I can't get any of this COVID money, right? Like I can't make a case just, and some of those organizations are critical part, take care of a critical issue in our community. So it is a little bit of a conundrum, because what happens is that I think in general, people are looking at basic needs still being a huge challenge in our community: food, housing, childcare. I mean, like the basics. And so, and so there's this need to sort of respond to that, right? And it's just, I don't even have a good answer. It's very challenging, but I would not change. One thing I think about is that maybe those organizations, regardless of what they do, should try to come together and have and put together a case for support within COVID for why the community shouldn't forget about them, right? Because there might be an after effect that we're going to have to deal with when I think about domestic violence, right? I mean, like we might not be taking care of it now, which means that, I don't know, in 8 months, that's going to be a big problem. And so I think that there's a case to be made. And I think I would focus on that.
Thank you. Tony, so follow-up question for you based on what we just heard from Benny. Do you think this is a good time for smaller organizations to be thinking about more about collaborating or merging or partnering for grants together?
Yeah, I think it is, Patty. We, along with some other funders, started the Education Innovation Fund. It just went through 3 rounds of application and grants. And the ones that rose to the top were those that were focused on equity and those that were in collaboration with other partners. So I think many funders right now, like we're strapped just like nonprofits are strapped, in the sense that there's not enough money to go around. And so the more collaboration I think that's possible, I think the chances are increased that money would go there.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear from you as well about your funding priorities at the moment, and what kinds of programs you guys are looking to fund.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. It hasn't changed much for us. We've always been focused on education innovation, looking for new models of educating kids. We have a focus on low-income families and kids. If anything, COVID accelerated that change and that need for innovation around education. And we're seeing it play out now. Anybody who has a kid at home that is supposed to be remote learning, and if they have a job at the same time, is experiencing this pain, right? And that challenge of trying to figure out how your kid receives a really good education while you continue to work your job. And for those who physically have to show up to their job, like, this becomes an almost untenable situation. So I guess suffice it to say that we think there are different models of educating kids that can still focus on equity and focus on low-income kids that will help relieve that tension.
Great, thank you. And do you think now is a good time for nonprofits to seek new relationships with foundations that they haven't worked with before?
I do. Yeah, we through the Education Fund, we actually funded many organizations that we hadn't not been aware of before. Now, we put out really small grant amounts, 5,000, 8,000, maybe up to 20. But what that did was surfaced from the community those people who had interesting ideas and smaller nonprofits that had never been on our radar screen, and allowed them a chance at some money. And that, even a small amount of money starts to establish that relationship. I think that's what's really key over the long run. I think, to Benny's point, it's hard right now if you're a small nonprofit and you don't have a COVID response, right? Like, you're doing good work. Yes, COVID impacts you, but it's not a specific response to COVID. It's a tough place to be. It's a tough situation.
So one thing that I would love to ask any of the 4 of you is about strategic planning. So I've heard that mentioned as something that each of your organizations has really spent some time on. Do you think now, during the middle of what is turning out to be a pretty challenging year for nonprofits, do you think this is a good time for nonprofits to develop their strategic plans?
Can I weigh in here? Because I'm the one organization probably that doesn't have a strategic plan. And I don't fundamentally believe in strategic planning as I've seen it done in the sector, both in the nonprofit side and on the funder side. People spend an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out what they should do, or how to couch it in the language that is the language of the day, or responding to the crisis of the day. And I think that there's a part of me that just rejects the notion that you can predict 3 years from now what the world's going to be. So what we've tried to do is to say, what is our core mission? It's to serve low-income kids and get them a better education. And the tactics and strategies we use are going to have to be constantly evolving. And we have to pilot and prototype, just like the nonprofit sector has to pilot and prototype. And when we find something that works, it works for a period of time, but it probably doesn't work forever. And so we have to be increasingly nimble and flexible as funders, which I think is one of our least exercised muscles as funders. So I think we should be a lot more flexible and fund things with a higher risk tolerance and not be locked into a strategic plan. But I'll stop. I'll get off my soapbox there for strategic planning.
I'd love to pop in on that. We transitioned from the Colorado Ocean Coalition into the Inland Ocean Coalition in 2017 and really took a broad look, staying focused in Colorado. And we put together what we call a matrix, which is kind of our strategic plan. And I think what you said about being nimble is absolutely critical. So we review it quarterly. And, you know, it's not so rigid that we're stuck in it. And we try to modify and we say, oh yeah, we are, you know, reaching those goals and those deliverables. And then after our virtual Masquerade Mermaid Ball, we'll go into the end of our quarter, you know, the end of the year, and review it and say, okay, first of all, we have to think about the election because we do a lot of policy work on a federal level. So we have to incorporate the leadership in our planning for next year. But I think if you have a framework, you know, your mission, your vision, you know, your geography, I think you can incorporate the strategic planning review process without having to go like a brand new thing. Look, in 2017, yes, we had to do a brand new thing. But right now, I think with COVID, so many of us are just trying to figure out how to get through the week and reach our goals, that having a framework that you can review might be a great opportunity versus completely starting from scratch, because we don't know what's going to happen in 3 months, in 6 months. So
And
I think nimble is great.
And I would add to that, I think you have to think about your different constituent bases sometimes when you're thinking about strategic planning. I often think about, we have an organization of 100 people, and if my 100 people don't know what we're trying to achieve and how we're going to try to achieve it, then that makes it hard to manage. So I love the nimbleness, and I think that it's really important, but we also have to have some framework that can sort of rally everybody. And I think the other thing in nonprofits is that we live in an extraordinarily, on our side, not necessarily on the funder side, but on the receiving side, we live in an extraordinarily resource constrained world, and everything is about sequence. Because if you're trying to move an issue and you don't have a marketing person, or you don't have a finance team, or you don't have this or that, then you've got to figure out how to sequence some of those things with the resources that you have. And I think that's been really useful for us in strategic planning. But I am the first to admit that you're absolutely right. We will not know what the world is going to be like 3 years from now, but we've done sort of short-term cycles of planning. Absolutely. And I actually think now is a good time to do some thinking about how you adjust to what is, I think, now a permanent change to our world, right? Like, how do we strategically as an organization recognize that nobody is going back to the office in the same ways that we used to, that we now have the ability to collaborate across regions in ways that we didn't used to, like all kinds of things that have shifted our world. And I think it's a great moment in time to be thinking about that. The only problem is none of us have time because we're still responding to COVID. So
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah, I would just add that it's I don't think it's a time to start one, but I do think if you have one, it's a time to look at it, like Lauren said, in the context of what's happened, and see where perhaps you have missed the boat in what you thought before, right? So even in our own case, you know, we Rose Community Foundation has a long history of supporting the Latino community, and not just supporting the community, but like building infrastructure in that community. And we went back into our data to see how we had done with the Black community and realized, oh, wow, like we did some, but it was not nearly as intentional. It was not nearly as permanent. And so that is informing what's next, right? In some shape or form. So I think it's an opportunity to sort of do some thinking and some data mining and some sort of, based on sort of what's happening out there, to do a check with yourself, right? Like, was I doing well? Am I still doing well? Am I missing something? I think it's a great time to do that, but not to start anything.
Great, thank you. One topic I really want to make sure we dive into is virtual events. So as we know, fundraising events are usually a big part for many, many nonprofits and their budget each year. I'm curious to know if any of you have successfully done a virtual fundraising event, if you have one coming up, if you have any advice, if you know of any resources for planning those. Whoever would like to jump in, please feel free.
I'll jump in because we have our virtual Masquerade Mermaid Ball coming up on October 15th. And normally, well, we just started it a couple of years ago. You know, we had a couple hundred people coming in from Denver, Boulder, Golden, you know, Front Range, and 220, 230, a lot of fun. And we had to figure out how to turn that into a virtual event. So what I did is I watched lots of other virtual events, like ridiculous numbers of other virtual events, to the point where I could be like, oh, that seemed really stiff, or that was really, oh, that was torture, or wow, that was pretty cool. So I would recommend doing your homework to find out what your feeling is, what kind of experience you want. And then what I did not realize was if you're doing a virtual event, it is like producing a television show. You have to have so many pieces of it pre-recorded because you don't know if your internet's going to go out, if somebody who's participating, their electricity goes out. So lots of that. And then having a professional MC that's comfortable asking for money and introducing people, and you know, then getting your testimonies, and then kind of doing your what he calls your soul bearing talk about why should people give to your organization, like what is it about your group that is going to be really compelling to others. So it's taken me months just to get my head wrapped around it, and now we're out literally a month. And now we're in full-on production. So there's an auction component, but I'm not doing live. That scares me. So there's an online auction component. There's going to be a merman contest because I wanted it to be whimsical as well as true, you know, ocean. And a lot of just fun, because oceans are a tough thing to address these days with warming and plastic pollution, but it's also so important to get full-on engagement with people inland to really help change the tide, so to speak. So trying to get that personality that you want in the event, I think, is a really important start.
And I'll chime in. Our event is October 3rd, so it's only 2 weeks away. So I have to start with the preface that we started at the beginning, which is I hate events. As a fundraiser, I think they really are such low ROI, but that doesn't mean that they go away. And we do have one, and so I think some of the keys for us have been really shifting our thinking about when we have a live event. So much of it is about bringing the passion to the room, and you do the live auctions, and you do, you know, your paddle raise, and you do all these things to really create the energy. And what we've shifted is said we're not going to risk that people aren't tuning in, because when they come to an event, when they've bought a ticket in person, like they're there and we have their attention. And so we have shifted almost all of our efforts to pre-sell. So basically the paddle raise, we've got everybody locked up ahead of time. We have gotten all our commitments, we're out there pitching, and what we love is that that's really, you know, that last tail of that shift to our major donor engagement and our just donor engagement as a whole, so that we know basically what we're going to raise day of, because we've already got the commitments in place. So I think that's been a key thing, keeping the program really short. Obviously, we'll see whether this is all successful, but we said an hour, absolutely max. There's nothing more. So that's a little bit different. And I think bringing something that not forces, but entices people to tune in, you know, to the event, whatever it might be. So for us, we're launching our name change. So that's, you know, something. We have Katherine Heigl, a great celebrity, who's going to speak for us. So a couple of things that will try and bring a little bit of attention and a reason to tune in is helpful, I think.
Oh, go ahead, Benny or Tony.
I would just add that we don't do fundraising events and but I've been involved in that a lot in my past. But Rose Community Foundation is 25 years old this year, and we had an event planned that we canceled because it was just not appropriate. So it wasn't a fundraising event. And so the only thing I have to contribute is from a personal philanthropic perspective. And so I, as a member of this community, feel a need and an urgency and a responsibility to give, no matter if I can be in the room, if I get to wear a fabulous new dress or not. And so I do want to say, to keep that in mind, right? Like there are a lot of people walking around with that feeling, like, you know, so I often attend virtual events, but I don't attend the whole thing because I'm on this all day. So I don't really want to do that on my time off either. But I do feel a responsibility to give no matter what. And so I would just encourage you to lean in on that responsibility and that sense of ownership about what's happening in this community that individual donors and people have now.
We need more Bennies out there in the world, that's for sure. It's true. I think the thing that strikes me as a funder is that we get invited to a lot of virtual events, just like we used to get invited to lots of live events, and you burn out on those pretty quickly as a funder. And I think the thing, Lauren, that you said that really struck me is the virtual events that I will attend, or at least attend part of, are ones that bring in an interesting speaker. Because like if I'm going to support that organization and it's just like the crew giving the performance, it's like I can just donate, I don't need to be there. But when there's an interesting speaker, it does start to lure me in more as a funder. And now what's interesting is you can get some amazing speakers because guess what? They're on Zoom. You don't have to fly them. You don't have to get a hotel. You know, the scheduling oftentimes works better. And so we've seen some great events where there's some really amazing speakers, and I think that helps draw people in.
That's great. Thank you. And we have a follow-up question. So for Lauren and Vicki, did you contract out for your virtual event, or do you have internal staff who are producing the event for you?
Both. So we have internal staff helping pull a lot of pieces, but we had to contract out for the production team that's actually going to be pushing all the buttons to bring in our speaker to then, you know, have the fun stuff to facilitate, and then also the MC, who's from Denver, who has a lot of experience in, you know, PBS fundraising, you know, phone-a-thons, telethons. So having somebody who's really comfortable and able to juggle, and then getting your production team is really important. So yeah, we didn't do this all on our own.
Yeah, and I think for us, it's a interesting confluence of events, right? So we had it booked for the Sewell Ballroom, right, and had a real in-person event scheduled. And so the Sewell Ballroom, also looking to maintain revenue, has sort of turned themselves into a production team for online events. So, you know, they're trying to stay afloat just like everyone else. And the caterers for the Sewell Ballroom have been longtime huge supporters of our work and participants in our work. So that's been a nice connection that's allowed us to do some things. So from that production perspective, a little bit of outsourcing. We also had an internal staff change completely unrelated to COVID and unrelated to other things, where we had previously had an internal events person. We didn't, sort of going into COVID, and we thought, well, do we rehire that position? And the answer was clearly, you know, we're not going to be doing a whole lot of events. So the answer was no. And what we ended up doing was outsourcing a little bit of the event management and just sort of the logistics that would otherwise have been an internal staff. And we think that's going to be a permanent change for us. We really liked that model and think it allows our team to really focus on, again, on the relationships, which is so critical, and just give the logistics to somebody else who knows what they're doing and has been great at it. So I think long-term, that's a really good solution.
Yeah, I know one of the hardest parts about putting on an event as a nonprofit is that it can just take up so much staff time, and that definitely needs to factor into how much money you're raising. So you guys you had a lot of great suggestions about how to be innovative with your virtual events. And Tony and Benny, I'd love to ask you guys actually in the last couple of minutes that we have here before we open it up for questions. Are you guys looking for more innovative approaches to doing things differently right now? And do you have any examples that you've come across of organizations that are doing a really good job of innovating?
Well, I'll start. I mean, I don't, I think that less in terms of, maybe it is innovation, but I don't know that I think about it as traditional innovation. What we have realized in doing our own internal sort of soul searching is that we've been very good at supporting the mainstream nonprofit well and sufficiently and all of that. And what we have not done so well is support grassroots, sort of boots on the ground nonprofits that are not sophisticated, that don't have a grant writer, that don't have a marketing person, but that are usually, we're finding, led by people who have such proximity to the issues they're trying to solve that's what makes it unique, and that's where the innovation comes in, right? Like that you have somebody who's running a reentry program who was in prison for 18 years. Let me tell you, that person has solutions that their regular correction system can't even think about because they come at it from a different angle. So we are looking a lot at that.
That's great. I would ditto everything Benny had to say about that. The closer we get to the people we are trying to serve, the better the results and the more innovative the programs. So the most innovative programs we've seen have come from students. So if you go to the end user and ask them what they want, they will tell you, and they have great ideas. It's easy to assume things about a person or a community that you actually have no idea about. They are the experts of their lives, and they are great innovators if given the opportunity. So.
Great. Well, is there anything else any of the four of you would like to add before, again, we go to the question and answer section of the talk?
You know, I just want to add on this events thing, which, you know, again, I don't have an event to plan and so it might be a lot easier for me to say this, but I really need to say this. Like, in this time when everything is going virtual and we're trying to do it this way, just like give grace to yourself and give grace to whoever is putting on that event, because, I mean, we just have to do that for each other. It just, do not expect perfection. Do not expect to give perfection.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hope we can all have more realistic expectations about what's possible right now. All right, so for the start of the question section, Vicki, a question for you. What's the average gift size of someone enrolled in your monthly giving program?
The average is somewhere between 15 and 20. We've got lower, we've got higher, but that's our average.
And do you know what the annual value of your monthly giving program is to your organization about?
We just started this, so this is a brand new approach. We did have 2 recurring donors before we started the ambassador program, and it's looking like it's about 2,000 right now. We hope to have 4 training sessions next year, so that'll probably double, because this year we've only had 2. We're doing our second.
Wonderful. And Lauren, do you guys have a monthly giving program or any thoughts to share on monthly giving?
We do have a monthly giving program, but I would say it's not a big seller for us, mostly because we really push it through just our traditional, sort of email and social media channels. And so we get some, but I honestly couldn't tell you what the total annual value is, but there are a handful of people that do give monthly, which is wonderful.
Great.
Hey Patty, can I introduce just a short topic, maybe short. One of the things that's been on my mind and brought up from this call is that tension again between the many nonprofits we have in Colorado. And Colorado has probably more nonprofits per capita than most states. And the need for those organizations to keep going, the needs around COVID and direct family services and cash to families. And there's a tension there that my take is that not all nonprofits are going to survive. And that's something we have a hard time talking about in this sector is, should nonprofits be there forever? Do some nonprofits have a limited life? And what happens when circumstances start forcing the consolidation of those services? It's a really thorny topic. It's a really hard thing because having worked in the nonprofit sector, you want your nonprofit to survive. Like flat out, that's, it's paramount as an ED. That's what you're thinking about. As a funder, I think we have the luxury and maybe privilege of stepping back and saying it's the client. Are the people getting the services they need, not is the nonprofit surviving? And I just find that to be it's come up to the surface because of COVID. I think because there's so little money out there and so much need. So I don't know if others have thoughts on that, but I think it's a very interesting and hard thing to talk about.
Well, when you're trying to protect oceans from Colorado, we don't have a lot of competition, but we do a lot of collaboration. So we work with communities who are, working on plastic pollution issues or trying to ban polystyrene or single-use plastic. So I think collaboration is absolutely critical. But when it comes to human services, that's out of my topic zone, so I won't even touch that one.
No, I would definitely add to that. I would sort of tap into something that Benny said, which is, I think the unfortunate part, though, is that in this period of potential consolidation, the winners and losers are not necessarily defined by their impact. They're defined by their marketing ability. And to me, that's sort of the conundrum that the nonprofit world faces, is that the criteria of success are just all about your fundraising ability, right? Or, that's the reality of the world. And I don't think that should be the right criteria. And so how do you guys as funders really look to how do we help those organizations that are having great impact survive? And I'm not going to stand up and say, oh, that's my organization. That's not it. But how do you really take that focus as opposed to just sort of let, the chips fall where they may, because I think that may end up in the wrong place for us as a community.
So we have a question that I think is pretty relevant to what you guys are talking about at this moment. What are some meaningful ways that a small, relatively unknown nonprofit can approach other nonprofits and or foundations to build new relationships?
I'm doing that all the time, but I'll let Benny go first.
I'm putting on both my funder and my nonprofit sort of hats. I think funders would be very interested in hearing from folks who have that idea or want to some thought leadership around that. And I think funders there might be a case for, so part of this is, to me, is like it is about the community that we're serving and the people that we're serving and the role of that organization. And so I look at it that way first, right? And so, but one thing I would say is maybe think about asking for money for a business, a business thinker that can come in and help you and some other organizations think through this. I mean, I think that's a very appealing request, right? And again, I think you need a business person, because then you think about it from that perspective and not from an organization perspective, right? What makes business sense for the change that we're trying to achieve in community? But I think that might be a neat thing to think about. Like, I'm going to come together with a couple others, and what we need help with is capacity to think this through, is to develop this line of thinking.
Yeah, I think when we were prepping for this call at another point in time, I said, I am a huge advocate. I have an MBA from Wharton, so I'm like, I see it from the business perspective that we have so much duplicated capacity within nonprofits that we don't collaborate. And part of that comes from this resource constraint that we also don't have the time to invest in creating those collaborative relationships with other organizations. But I will stand here and say, if there is any nonprofit out there that needs space, we have space. That needs finance help, we have finance team, and we have a structure that works, that needs HR help. Like, all those things, we are here to help other nonprofits and to figure out a way to do that. I think that, I would turn and sort of ask the funding community, what can you do to help facilitate some of that collaboration so that we can all come together? There's some great examples. It's been, I've been trying to push this for like 7 years, which is in Minneapolis. There's the MAC, which is actually a collaborative association. It started with 3 nonprofits who were in the same space, and they just said, let's combine our back offices. They've grown to approximately 50 nonprofits, all in the $1 to $10 million range. And they did it without marketing, without anything. It was a compelling business argument that made it all happen. And so I think that it exists. So that's one thing. The other thing, for those that don't know, if you're sort of 1 million and under, there's the Colorado Nonprofit Development Center, which is a great resource that can do a lot of things for organizations, particularly on the back office side, HR, payroll, 501c3 issues, et cetera. So that's another resource for folks.
I was just going to jump in and say we have a lot of collaboration on issues. So we've got literally, I would say, 6 collaborators when we're dealing with marine protected areas or offshore oil development. But I don't feel like we have a nonprofit collaboration to do exactly what you're saying. And I think that would be really amazing. Like, okay, how do we strategize around fundraising if you're under $1 million organization and you're not dealing with human services, so it's a different, more challenging opportunity to fundraise. How do you increase diversity? Like, how do you do it in a way that isn't seeming just superficial, and really try to get into some of these conversations? So I'm putting that out there, as I think a lot of nonprofits are experiencing how we might move that dial forward. And I think there's going to be a big willingness, because we're all kind of in our homes now. We don't have the commute time. So in a way, there's a little bit more time to delve into some of these issues that are kind of organizational growth challenges versus just kind of, grappling with the issues, which we're the experts on the issues, but we're not necessarily the experts on fundraising and growth and organizational development.
Great, and we have just a few more minutes. I'm hoping we can squeeze in 2 more questions. First one is for Lauren. Any insights you can share about the name change of your organization? So you are currently the Adoption Exchange, and you are becoming Raise the Future? Yes. So the insight is, I would just challenge you, if I say that I'm from the Adoption Exchange, what does that put in people's heads? And I will tell you that it puts all the wrong things in your heads. So we embarked on a plan. It started probably 2 years ago, really, to knowing that we needed to change our names, and really went through an entire branding process, really to define and help us work through all of it, to bring some of our constituents along who had been with the organization for quite a long time, and really bring everybody together around a new name. Our work is actually not adoptions, so even having adoption in the name makes it really difficult. So for us, it's really about connections, and about connections for youth and foster care. We do work and help with adoptions from foster care, but more importantly, we work on permanent relationships, however they might be. They might be kin.
They might be brother, they might be sister, they might be bio mom or family of origin that got separated and now they need to be reunified. So really all kinds of permanent connections. And so we just needed something that really spoke to the breadth and depth of our work. And it's been a long, long journey to get there, but we're very excited to finally be there.
Great, thank you. And one more question, is funding for arts and culture, do we think that funding is dead in the COVID era?
I don't think it's completely dead. It feels like it's dead right now if you're in the arts and culture sector. We certainly see some funding going on through like Pomfrey Stanton here in Colorado and some other funders, and we're seeing more people understand the need in education for the arts and culture for kids. That social emotional learning, the enrichment, the non-academic side. So I think it's still alive, but it's going to be a long, hard road.
I agree. I don't think it's dead, but I think that's an industry that can do some rethinking about their relevance right now. In general, Rose Community Foundation doesn't usually fund arts and culture, but we are very interested in equity and we are very interested in racial justice. So if your arts and culture is alleviating inequities, if it's creating awareness about racial injustices, if it's doing that, then there's a place for you. But that's an industry that had sort of started thinking about the role that they play in inequities. And I think this is a good time to really think about that, right? Like, who can go to the opera and who can afford to go to the opera? And so right now, at least from our perspective, if you come at it from that angle, we definitely would consider it.
All right, so I think we are just about at time here. I want to thank YANA again for hosting this webinar, and I think this is a great time to mention that they have upcoming programs about this very topic of, it's called Necessary Relevance of Arts and Culture in Society. So the first program is going to be on October 7th. So thank you so much, Tony, Benny, Lauren, and Vicki. This was great. Thank you to everyone who attended, and Rachel, I'll let you take it from here.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining today's panel discussion. I'm Rachel Tibbetts, Yale College of 99, and I've been so pleased to be part of YANA Colorado since its inception a few years ago. So for any of those of you who are not already YANA members, we'd love to encourage you to join us as we continue to connect and collaborate with amazing people in the nonprofit world, like our wonderful speakers today. If you're interested in joining, I believe that you can just reach out to Michael or myself or even Patty or Rachel Littman. You'll also be receiving more information via email shortly today or tomorrow, including the recording of this webinar and a short feedback survey. And we'd certainly love to hear more from you. So would encourage you to take a moment to complete the survey or reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wanted to say thank you again to YANA Colorado, to Patty for managing this, to Rachel Tibbetts, and to Michael Mazer and YANA Colorado, and to all of our organizations and funders out there. Thank you for supporting and doing what you do. Please join YANA. We have a network of over 6,000 people. We provide community support and resources, and this is exactly right up our alley for the kind of stuff we like to highlight and share with each other. So thank you for sharing your expertise and your time and your tidbits and your resources, and we'll continue to help share information back and forth. So have a wonderful day. We're right on the hour. Hope to see you at the next YANA event. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.